What's up, you guys? I'm Chibi Joe, back with another improv movie review. And today we're doing Infinity War. That's way back when. We're going to do that other movie, Endgame. My memory is shit. So, I saw it the night before opening day. Because we can see it that Thursday evening before the Friday when it officially releases. So, I think that's what happened. I don't know how my theater works. Anyways, this movie I absolutely loved. The thing with like a lot of movies that I watch, I don't really notice like the political undertones unless it's like very overt, like Star Wars Episode 8 or Widows. Widows was very like feminist and diverse, pushed. The problem with those kind of movies, whenever they're overt, they're focusing so much on the political statement. They're not focusing anything on the actual movie, I guess you could say. You know, the actual storytelling and all that. And so, a lot of times, I'm not interested in those movies. I lose interest whenever they're, like, forcing it down my throat what they're trying to say. So, when I'm doing this review, everyone who's going to be saying like, "Oh, feminism," I honestly didn't even notice it, and not because like it's not there. I mean, there's a scene where it was, but I just didn't feel like it like was shoving it down my throat because it was still badass. So, and I thought it was a great one-liner, so it all works. So, anyways. Movie starts with Hawkeye, and he has an ankle monitor from Civil War. He is teaching his daughter how to shoot a bow and arrow. She does really well. He says, "Good job, Hawkeye," referencing his superhero name in the comics, even though Hawkeye is never really mentioned in the movies. I forget which one it was, but they mentioned the hawk, meaning him. And so like his wife is making food, his sons are playing catch, and then they all disappear from the snap. What I really liked is there was a scene whenever he's like looking for his family, you know, calling their names and all that stuff. And you see like lightning in the distance. And when I noticed that, I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's a reference to what's going on right now. It gives you like a perfect idea of where in time, what's going on when this happened. And so then like it moves over to the fight with Thanos, and then they all, like, the remaining members of the Avengers join together. They go off into the planet where Thanos is located. And it goes off to, like, his point of view, where he is, like, well, not really his point of view, but, like, it goes to Thanos, who hasn't yet, you know, met the Avengers on that planet yet. And he's just, like, a common farmer just living off the land. And he is just working on land, picking food to eat. He's, like, heavily scarred from the fight with the Avengers. He still is wearing the Infinity Gauntlet. And then when he comes back and he's, like, cooking and all that stuff, the Avengers come down and, like, immediately, like, Thor, like, after he's like, I use the Infinity Stones to destroy the Infinity Stones, so then it can't, you know, the effect can't be reversed. Thor kills him, cuts off his hand, like the very beginning, cuts off his hand, cuts off his head, and my favorite line in that whole entire scene was Nebula. She's like, "My father is many things, but a liar he is not," which I think showed so much like badassery, and because it's like whatever Thanos says is an understood promise. It's not an empty threat. So then, Thor cuts off his head, and they're like, "What the hell did you just do?" And Thor's like, pretty much, Thor was like, "There's no point. It's over with. He's dead." And so it goes 5 years in the future. I totally forgot to mention about Tony Stark, the whole Tony Stark stuff. He's like, well, we're going to die tomorrow morning because that's like the last of the oxygen. And that'll be it. They make it home because of Captain Marvel. Great fun. It was pretty amazing beginning. But anyways, 5 years later, the Avengers are still going on, but not nearly the amount. It's like Black Widow and like 4 or 5 others that are continuing the work of the Avengers. You get like a reference to like a lot of earthquakes in the ocean by Wakanda, which a lot of people are thinking is going to the introduction of Namor, name that I always pronounce Namer when I was little, and I had like the Marvel comic cards, and so like so you hear like that from, I can't remember her name, Shuri, is that her name? The lady from Wakanda. She's like talking about that. Then you have like Rocket and all them. They're doing space stuff, and then you get this moment where Captain Marvel is like looking very concerned at Rodney or Rhodey, and she's like, be careful. So you get kind of like a feeling that maybe they're a thing. It doesn't really come to effect in any other part of the movie, but you kind of get that feeling that she does have a lot of feelings for him, or a lot of concern for him. I mean, a lot happens in 5 years, so it's completely up in the air on what happened, what didn't happen. So, Black Widow and War Machine are talking, and they are. You hear like War Machine say, well, just saw some bunch of drug cartels like dead in Mexico, and it's most likely Clint. It's most likely Hawkeye. And he's like, if it is him, I don't want to meet him. In other words, he's been killing a bunch of people, a bunch of cartels. And so she gets off the call with War Machine after making him promise that he'll find out where Clint's going next. And so you have Captain America show up, and I forgot to mention, Captain America runs like a support group for people who lost loved ones in with the snap. And you get like the first openly gay character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, played by one of the directors, I believe. Yes. And he basically went on a date, and I kind of found it like a bitter funny, where he's like, the date like cried before they even brought the salads out. And then Steve asks the guy, he's like, well, what about you? And the guy's like, I started crying when they brought out the dessert, or like brought out the cake or something like that. I thought that was kind of like a bitter, funny line. I really liked that. I feel like Captain America would be, like, out of all of them, would be the one to start a support group. Because he believes so strongly in unifying and things like that. He seems like the one that would bring a support group to bring people together, so then people can help each other move forward. And so, anyways, fast forward. Him and Black Widow are talking, and that's when you see Steve Lang. I think that's his name. May not be. You see Ant-Man. And he's like talking all this gibberish about time travel and how we can get back. He also like met his daughter, and like she's like 5 years older, of course, and he's like, oh man, you've gotten so big. That broke my heart, because I didn't even think about that. It's like, this is like, he looks exactly the same, and she's 5 years older. Like, he missed 5 years of her life. Like, that's a lot for a kid growing up, because just how much kids change from year to year until they get into adulthood. And even then, they'll still change. Like, I look very different than when I was 22, so I can only imagine, like, however old she was in Ant-Man 2 to 5 years later in Endgame. So, we go on, and he's, like, talking all this gibberish with Black Widow and Captain America, like, oh, man, time travel. And so they go to Tony Stark first, because that's Tony Stark's field, like quantum physics, things like that. And Tony Stark basically says, no, there's so much risk involved. I don't want to risk that. I have a good life here. I have a daughter. I have, a beautiful wife. I don't want to get rid of my family. And eventually, like, they leave. And then Tony Stark is, like, doing simulations, and he figured it out. He figured out what they could do, what shape of the vortex they could do to basically make it work. And so the 3 remaining Avengers, I guess, like the 3 homebound Avengers, meet up with Bruce Banner, who has since then essentially stayed in Hulk form, but has Bruce Banner's brain in control. I was kind of indifferent to this. I didn't like it, but I enjoyed it because of character development. I like the Incredible Hulk. I like the madness. I like just the pure, unbridled rage of just destruction and all that stuff. I love that about Hulk, because Hulk, like, that's what made Hulk interesting to me, is that he's not in control. Like, all the other Avengers are well disciplined and all that stuff. Hulk isn't. Hulk is just destruction and all that stuff. So I was disappointed in that, and I continued being disappointed with this in the movie with it. So, but like, it wasn't bad. It just, I like normal Hulk better. So I'm not adding my own personal bias of which Hulk I like best into my idea of the film, because frankly, like I said, it's great for character development of Bruce Banner. So they're talking to Bruce Banner, who's become like a local celebrity, and he like is taking pictures with kids and stuff like that. And there's a funny little exchange when the kids show up, that this funny moment with kids where he's like, he takes the picture, and then Ant-Man is like, hey, you want to take a picture with me? I'm Ant-Man. And they're like, no, we're good. And Hulk is trying to convince the kids, like, yeah, take a picture with them. And Ant-Man's like, put the goddamn phone away or something like that. And it was just really funny to me. I loved it. They never heard of me, Hulk. And so they keep going, and Hulk is like, let's head back, because he's like, well, I'll do my best. He's like, this is not really my field. And so they keep going. Then you have like the Tony Stark scene whenever he figures everything out, and he takes his daughter to bed. Him and Pepper are having a conversation. He's like, I'm just going to delete it. I'm just going to shut it down and not use it. He's like, and then I can go to sleep. Essentially, he's like, he's really wanting to revert back to who he was prior to Iron Man. And Pepper's pretty much like, you're not that guy anymore. You can't just simply do that anymore. Are you going to be able to sleep at night knowing that you could have fixed it, but you didn't? So, then it goes to the Avengers again, and they're trying to work on the time travel, and they end up turning Ant-Man into a teenager, an old man, and a baby. And there's a great line where, someone wet my suit, and I don't know if it was old me or baby me, or me. And it was just a really great line. And then Hulk had a line after he fixed it, he's like, time travel. And so Tony Stark comes up, gives Captain America a new shield, and he's like, let me guess, you turn him into a baby. He's like, and amongst other things. And so Tony Stark basically it just says like you are making time pass through him, not him pass through time. And Tony has a way to fix that. So he gathers all the Avengers, and basically they're trying to get the other Avengers, and so they go to New Asgard. They talk to the Valkyrie, and the Valkyrie is like, yeah, we see him like maybe once, twice a year to get resupplied. And it's like this huge like barrel of beer. And so it goes up to they go up to Thor's house. And I didn't watch Ragnarok, so I don't remember these guys' names, but there are two characters from that. And they're playing Fortnite. And Thor is like fat now. His hair and beard is like real long and scraggly and just looks all around nasty. Like he looks like the dude from The Big Lebowski. I thought that was a really, really good joke later on when they call him The Big Lebowski. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I saw what Thor looks like now. And he's just like chugging beer all the time. The Rock guy is having problems with Noob Player 69 or something like that, or Noob Killer 69. And like, he's like, Thor, I'm having trouble with Noob Killer 69 again. And, or I'm having trouble with that player again. And like, Thor's like, Noob Killer 69. And so he grabs the headset and he's like, listen here, Noob Killer 69. If you continue messing with my friends, I will fly over to your house and like rip off both of your arms and shove them up your butt. Thank you, Thor. It was a great little like random scene. It was kind of off-putting, just because like it was like really, really serious, kind of serious, like Avengers, like Marvel Cinematic Universe series, where it's not like fully serious, but like the overtone is serious, and then it becomes not serious at all. So it was kind of off-putting of just how fast it changed. And Thor uses Stormbreaker, whatever the axe is called. He uses it as a can opener, or a bottle opener, I mean. And they mention, he's like, Thor, we can undo what Thanos did. And Thor's like, don't mention that name in the house. Like, he was very, like, you could tell he felt like a failure. He felt like a complete and utter failure and that's what I loved about the scene is whenever they mentioned Thanos' name, like, you could see that he's not fully a frat boy. Like, he still feels like so much regret and hate for himself. And so they convince him to come back with them after saying they have beer. And so they go back, and who else did they convince to come back? That was a funny scene. I think that was it. You did get like a really intense scene whenever they went to Japan. Like the scene went to Japan, and you see all these Yakuza gangsters being just taken down like they were nothing, and you get this really badass sword duel, and like, you know who it is, even though his face is hidden. Like, you know who it is, and they are not trying to like make it like, oh man, who is this guy? Like, you know who it is. Like, they wanted you to know who it is because of the conversation between War Machine and Black Widow earlier. And so they're continually talking and stuff like that. And like, the Yakuza leader is like, why are you doing this to us? And Clint, aka Ronan, is basically like, I lost my entire family, and you scum are left. So I'm doing Thanos' job. Or my family had Thanos, you guys have me. And I loved that line. I like the anti-heroes, like, or like the heroes who turn anti-hero because they've lost something that was like their moral compass. I love that. Hawkeye quickly became like one of my favorite characters in this movie. I mean, I always loved Hawkeye. I always loved Jeremy Renner. So like, it's not that hard for me to like Hawkeye. But man, it was good. So Uh, Black Widow shows up, convinces him to join them, and so then like they're all assembled, and they're making plans and things like that. Like, okay, we need to do this. We need to like separate into teams, and some of us go after the this stone and this stone and this stone. And this is probably going to be my longest review. This is a 3-hour movie, and a lot happened in it. Like, it wasn't like some of the movies where like there was like unnecessary detail that I could skip or I could sum up in a sentence. Like, it's a lot of details. So they all separate into teams. Tony, Bruce, and I think what I'll do is I'll talk about each stone that they got. So Tony, Bruce, and Captain America, they went to the first Avengers movie, which was really cool. You kind of saw like other happenings and stuff. Captain America gets the staff. It was Tony's job to grab the Tesseract, but he lost it because Hulk, like the Avengers Hulk, like bashed through the door because he had to take the stairs because he was exceeded the weight limit. He's like, I hate stairs. It was like such a good scene. I laughed so hard like the entire time. And like Ant-Man like caused Avengers 1 Tony to have like cardiac arrest because he like unhooked something, which caused Thor to like zap him back to life with Mjolnir. But like whenever Tony got hit in the face with the door from the Hulk, I forgot Ant-Man was there too, because he's the one who said that's America's ass to Captain America, and so they're dealing with that. Loki ends up stealing the Tesseract and going back. Trying to think. They had a big burp. There we go. And you also get a really cool reference to the Captain America story where he says Hail Hydra. And it's a way, that's how he gets Loki's staff back, is he whispers Hail Hydra. And the guys are like, yeah, he's cool. Even though he's not, like, he's still a good guy. I loved that scene, like, a heck of a lot. I thought that was probably one of the best scenes in the movie. The best of the homages to the comic books. So then you have, they only have like, because they go through the quantum space, and they only had so many Pym particles for one trip there and one trip back. Well, Tony and Steve messed up, so they had to. So like Ant-Man went back to the future, and Tony and Steve went farther in the past to the 1970s, where Tony and Steve met his love interest. I can't remember her name. And Tony met his dad. And his mom was pregnant with Tony. And there's this really touching moment that I'm sure was awkward for Howard Stark, because he gave his dad a hug and he says, thank you for everything. And then he switches up to everything you've done for this country. And I really liked that, because like Tony has learned to respect his dad. Like, he hated his dad in the first Avengers, or in the first Iron Man movie. But like, he's gone through so much shit in his life that he's learned to respect his dad. And he gave his dad fatherly advice and stuff like that, and even said like his dad's like wisdom to his own dad without knowing it, of course. And then Steve steals the more Pym particles, You get to see like the old Ant-Man helmet from the comics, and it was pretty cool. I don't really read a lot of the comics, but like I could recognize stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. I didn't like fanboy over it, I didn't mark over it or anything like that. I just kind of like, oh, okay, that's cool. So like they get back to the future because they got more Pym particles now, and so they got the Tesseract. They got the Space Stone. Is that what it is? Next up, we'll do Thor and Rocket. They go to Asgard to get the ether that infected Jane Porter or whatever her name was, Natalie Portman. So like the original idea. Now, granted, this is still Fat Thor. He looks very different than Buff Thor. Like the original plan was, okay, you're going to talk to Jane, distract her, and I'm going to extract the ether from her to get that Infinity Stone. So like Thor starts having like a panic attack, and Rocket like slaps him across the face. And so Rocket's like, okay, let's go. And Thor's like, yeah, we'll go. I can do this. I'm Thor. I'm freaking Thor. And while Rocket Raccoon was walking towards Jane's room, Thor ran off and went to talk to his mom because his mom dies in Thor 2. Thor's like talking to his mom and stuff like that, and Rocket's like by himself. He's like, well, I guess I'm going solo or something like that. I forgot what he said. And Thor's talking to his mom. It's a very touching moment because, like, you know she dies that day. Like, you know that's the day that Freya dies. So, like, Thor's trying to tell her, you die today. And Freya's pretty much like, whatever my future is, I'll let it happen. You have to save your future. Because she knows that he's from a different time. And Rocket, like, scream like, hey, Thor, I got it! Time to go back now! And so, he's like, I got it. And so Thor, like, says, all right, well, time to go to the future and all that. And, you know, you have a nice little, like, I love you, Mom, or I love you, Mother, and I love you too, Thor. And he, like, extends his hand out, and there's, like, nothing going on. And Freya's like, sometimes it takes a little bit. And so, eventually Mjolnir gets into Thor's hand. So they go back to the future. They now have whatever stone that was. There's a nice scene when, like, Thor's talking about the Infinity Stones where he, like, makes fun of Dark World. Thought that was pretty funny. And so they go back to the future. Thor now has Stormbreaker and Mjolnir. And so next one we'll go to is probably the most intense one, and that was Black Widow and Hawkeye. They went after the Soul Stone, and so one of them had to die, and it was like this really intense, like, pseudo fight / race to basically see who ends up killing themselves. Like, Clint has lost everything, so he's pretty much self-sacrificial at this point, where he's like, I have nothing else to lose. And Black Widow made a really good point, basically saying, you'll get your stuff back. I don't have anything, period. And so, through a bunch of antics, including an explosive arrow and, like, a grappling hook, Black Widow ends up killing herself, and Clint is the one with the Soul Stone. And so then we have the final stone. At least the final stone that we really, like, follow. I totally forgot about Hulk. I'll talk about him after this. So they, Nebula and War Machine get to get the stone that Quill gets, and Guardians of the Galaxy 1. And they basically just wait for him to do his stuff, knock him the fuck out, and grab the stone. The issue is there's 2 nebulas in this universe, and they work off the same network. And I thought that was really interesting. So it's like, okay, that actually makes sense, that they work on the same wavelength. And so the computer would pick up both wavelengths since they're the same. And so, like, Thanos' nebula is, like, having, like, a mental breakdown because there's 2 nebulas working on the same thing. And so they basically, like, reverse the effects, freeze Avengers nebula, kidnap her, and basically steal her memories. Like, she still has them, but, like, they forcibly reveal themselves. And so Thanos figures out how to do time travel and all that stuff. And so he sends his nebula back to the future. I think that's it for, like, the stones, except for the Hulk, which the Hulk one, so he goes to the one lady in Doctor Strange. I'm great at remembering things. So she has the time stone in her necklace, and she knocks out his ethereal image. So, like, he's talking to her in the Bruce Banner form, not in the Hulk form anymore. And she explains how timelines work, and Hulk basically says, look, if we return the stones at the right times, nothing will change. Everything will happen as it's supposed to. And he said, Doctor Strange willingly gave the stone to Thanos. And she's like, oh, well, then he must know what he's doing. Which is the quickest way to win an argument, I guess, is just say, look, this guy's really smart. You believe in him. He did this willingly in our time. And she's just like, oh, well, okay, then. So they gather all the stones. They come back. Thanos Nebula is opening the time gate to let Thanos in. They set up the Infinity Gauntlet, and Hulk is Professor Hulk is like, I'll do it since I can take it. I'm the strongest out of all of you in terms of being able to take gamma radiation. And so he snaps. Everything looks perfectly fine. And then Thanos attacks and just starts, like, bombarding the Avengers headquarters. This is when it got really badass and really intense. So, like, everyone is separated and dealing with their own shit. Like, Hulk, Professor Hulk, War Machine, and Ant-Man are trying to get out from under the rubble. Hawkeye is, like, running from like the Thanos' dog species, whatever it is. And he's kicking their asses. And then, like, Tony, Thor, and Captain America, they all are, like, waiting to kick some ass. And they do so. And, like, you get this really cool moment. Even though Thor is still, like, fat and shit, his eyes start glowing blue. And he basically says, are you guys ready to kick some ass, essentially? And they're all like, yeah. And he's like, well, good. And then, like, lightning starts going around everywhere, and, like, Thor kind of, like, changes into, like, more Asgardian gear. His beard is braided, his hair is, like, more, like, tribal looking. It just looked really badass. Like, he's still fat Thor, but a fat ass badass Thor. And so they're just kicking each other's asses, and or kicking Thanos' ass, and, like, Thanos is kicking their ass. It's really back and forth. Thor has both Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, so it's just like, it was so good. And, like, you had Captain America picks up Mjolnir, and Thor's like, I knew it! And, like, so now it's like Captain America with the shield and Mjolnir, Thor with Stormbreaker. It was just really intense. You had, like, this one moment when, like, Thanos is, like, about to push Stormbreaker into Thor, just like Thor did in Infinity War. It was just really, really good. I almost said Infinity Thor. It was really, really good, really, really fun movie. And so, like, Thor is going on with that, eventually the other Avengers like pop up and they're like, "Sup, bitches," because like basically Thanos is about to lose, and so Thanos is like, just destroy everything, and so they're about to fire all the rockets and stuff, and everyone just shows up. Like, it's just going to be like army versus army, and it's just going to be like super chaotic. And it was like, you saw Pepper in the Iron Man armor, you saw like the Valkyries, you saw all of the sorcerers, and like everyone you ever seen in a Avengers movie that did something that was beyond normal human going to work shit. You saw them, and it was so freaking badass. And so, like, everyone is just kicking each other's asses, killing these things. And, like, there's a moment when they're trying to keep the Infinity Gauntlet away from Thanos. And so, like, it starts off with, because they're trying to get it to somewhere. And so, I can't remember who it starts out with. But anyways, they're running. Then they give it to Black Panther. Black Panther, like, speed runs through everyone. And then Spider-Man grabs it. Spider-Man's starting to get overran. And he's like, shit. And so, Captain Marvel's like, hey, I'll take care of it. He's like, okay, I don't know how you're going to get through everyone. And, like, all of the main female people are there. And they're like, yeah, nah, she's got this handled. And, yeah, it was super girl power, but it was so badass. Like, who cares? I don't give a shit about feminism. If they can make it badass, then I'm good with it. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen too often. But, yeah, that moment was really, really fun. I enjoyed the hell out of it. And so, Thanos ends up getting the Infinity Gauntlet. And then, there's this moment where when Iron Man is talking to Doctor Strange, and he's like, is this all supposed to what happened? And you know exactly what's going to happen whenever Doctor Strange is like, if I tell you what happens, it won't happen. And like when he said that, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I didn't know how, but I knew it was going to happen. And so, like, they're still all fighting Thanos, trying to keep away with Thanos with the Infinity Gauntlet. And so, Iron Man, like, tries to pull it off of Thanos, and Thanos, like, knocks him away. And Thanos snaps to basically, because now he's like, you know, you guys aren't satisfied with 50%, then I'll just destroy all of you and make it anew. And Rogers is like, you're going to build an entire universe on bloodshed. And he's like, they won't know. Which is a really good, a good point. Like, if he did remake a universe, they wouldn't know how it was made. It would just be like how, you know, the Big Bang did. We don't know what happened before it, if there was anything. And so, Thanos goes to snap, and nothing happens. And then Tony Stark, because he's like, remember, I am inevitable. And then, like, it shows Iron Man with all of the Infinity Stones in his hand, and his, like, little, like, Iron Man glove. And he's like, and I am Iron Man. Snaps. All of Thanos' forces are destroyed, and Thanos just kind of sits down, just like he did in the beginning of the movie. Just kind of sits down and looks off to the distance as he also fades into dust. And it was such a good visual. And so, like, Tony Stark dies. It's very sad. You go through, like, the funeral, and he has a hologram where he talks to his wife and kid and everyone. And then Steve volunteers to go back and basically place everything where they need to be, including Mjolnir, which confuses a lot of people. And it's like, no, he took it back to Thor 2, The Dark World, because that's where they took it from. It wasn't that complicated. And he never comes back. And then Bucky's like, hey, look over there. And you see a guy sitting on a bench. And then Falcon walks over, and it's like an old Steve Rogers. And Steve had this really good line where he's like, well, I went back and I thought, you know what? I kind of want to do what Tony was talking about and just live my life. And he does. He gets married to the British chick, and he hands Falcon the shield, saying, because he's like, well, man, the world's gonna miss Captain America. And Steve Rogers like, well, that reminds me. Here, and he hands him the shield, and he's like, you're Captain America now. And it was really good. I really liked it. And it ends with, it goes back to like the 1940s or 50s, and it's Steve dancing with the one lady. And it was just a really nice way to end. And then you have like an after credits sound of the hammer hitting the anvil, which I personally just take as, we're not finished with the Avengers yet. It was very nicely done. So, yeah, that's all I have for today's. That's all I got for you guys today. If you like it, comment, like, and subscribe. And guys, I'll see you next time. Have an awesome day and a good night.